Welcome back. My name is Alex,
And I'm Joe.
and today we're going to talk about the tragedy of Macbeth.
Yep. This adaptation of the play Macbeth was released Christmas Day 2021, directed by Joel Coen, and star-studded cast, including Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, Catherine Hunter, Alex Hassel, Corey Hawkins, and Harry Melling, who was Dudley in Harry Potter. This is essentially a straight adaptation of the play, slightly abridged, and some of the lines have been cut to make it better for cinema. But if you don't know the story of Macbeth, Macbeth is a military leader in Scotland who meets a witch who tells him he'll be the king. And because of this prophecy, he fulfills it, whether it's because of his own ambition or it was always going to happen, who knows. But he has King Duncan stay with him, kills him. The rightful heir, Malcolm, flees to England, and Macbeth becomes king at the behest of his wife, Lady Macbeth, who has a large role in telling him to actually kill King Duncan. And as the time goes on, he gets more paranoid, as well as Lady Macbeth. He sees ghosts, he kills his friends, and he experiences guilt. Lady Macbeth experiences guilt, and she famously sleepwalks and gives herself away, all culminating in Malcolm coming back with an army from England and Macduff severing Macbeth's head and Malcolm being crowned the King of Scotland. So the movie itself is that exact story, just slightly abridged, as I had mentioned.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that you kind of have to do because a lot of the lines in Shakespeare's Macbeth, if someone was killed, they would yell out like "Now I am dead" or something like that in the actual play. So it was a good thing that they cut that out. It would have been a little cheesy, obviously,
Yeah.
if Coen left that in there.
Yeah, I tried to follow the movie with the play next to me to see if I could follow the lines, and I couldn't do that because they rearranged a lot, and it would have been it kind of would have ruined the experience if they tried to go word for word.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think he did a good job there. So I think moving on to initial thoughts, what really stuck out to me with this was the contrast between light and dark. That's like super charged in this movie. I mean, it looks like a film noir basically at some points. A lot of bare landscapes, smooth and symmetrical, shots of all the locations. It's like a super artistic film. Each shot looks like almost like contemporary art or something, the way it is, like something you would see in a museum of modern art. But at the same time, it looks like a play that's being filmed, I think, to me at least, because so much of the background is so simple that it could be a stage. So I think it's not like those blockbuster Shakespeare movies like Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and 96, but more like Ran, which came out in 1985, the Japanese King Lear adaptation. That's what it reminded me of. I don't think it seems too raw of an interpretation for modern audiences, especially in the US, but I think Denzel really knocked it out of the park in his performance. And I think, he's been a part of a lot of Shakespeare adaptations, but I think he really delivered on this one.
Yeah, I agreed with most of your points, Alex. I'll get to the big one at the end, but I agree. It seemed kind of like just a play with the camera and made into a movie. I really liked the simple sets. I really liked the black and white. Joel Coen didn't try to razzle dazzle us with lots of intricate sets or costumes. It was all about the cinematography, the lighting, and definitely the performances and the actors. And at first I was against the abridged version, but then as I was looking at the play, I was like, this would have been pretty lame to try and do the play as a movie. Like you can either do the play as the play or a complete movie or this, which is a blend of the two.
Yeah.
I thought worked pretty well. The one disagreement I have with you, though, I thought Denzel was a little out of place.
I think he was too. I just think he did. I still think he did a good job. I think because the classic Denzel I think he says like huh or something like that. He's got this thing that he does. He sort of weaved it in the role,
Yeah.
which at times I thought was refreshing, I would say. It kind of like took me out of that English literature class and a little bit more into modern cinema.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. I don't know. Sometimes I felt like it's like, oh yeah, this is Denzel,
Right.
So
Training day. Yeah. Yeah, I completely get that.
I mean, not that he didn't do well, he did pretty damn well, but so just sometimes. Um, so moving on to overarching themes, and this is a tough one because Macbeth the play has been dissected, some 400 years. So we want to avoid that, but you can't completely avoid it because the movie is Macbeth. Some of the themes that come out, just real quick, are about ambition. Macbeth's ambition. Was he self-fulfilling the prophecy? How big of a role did Lady Macbeth play? The guilt they feel. And actually, one thing about Macbeth, the play, that is unique, especially for that time period, is how Shakespeare brought up the topic of being a man. It's brought up many times.
Yes.
Macbeth brings up, how he's being a man, or Lady Macbeth's asking him if he's being a man. And in the scene at the end, the famous scene near the end where Macduff is told his family is killed, Malcolm is trying to convince him to, essentially get over it and kill Macbeth. And Macduff's like, I have to feel it like a man. So lots of interesting topics there. So we kind of already talked about this in the initial thoughts, but the black and white and the simple sets, I think it really brings out the characters. One main thing about theater, aside from the play and the language that Shakespeare is famous for, is the actors' performances. And in this, the Tragedy of Macbeth, cinematography aside and the score, it was very heavily focused on the actors' portrayal of the characters. Lady Macbeth, Frances McDormand, was ruthless. You can definitely tell she was getting into the role of pushing Macbeth into assassinating king, like one of the worst, biggest crimes you could commit in that time period. And I think Denzel actually plays that very well, where he comes off as very hesitant, and then he kind of talks himself into doing it with Lady Macbeth's approval, if you will.
Yeah. I think he did an incredible job of being conflicted. And I think the biggest theme to me, that I think the genius of the play, which Denzel did a great job at conveying through that, kind of conflicted feeling, was you're not sure, if Macbeth is a moral man that's been corrupted by these witches and his wife, or if he's an immoral coward and he just needed to be pushed, a reason to be pushed, and the witches and his wife kind of gave him that little extra push that would have pulled him out of that cowardice to actually commit what he wanted to do. So I think he's super conflicted. A lot of times he's alienated, right? Because he's alone in that decision, even though he's being pushed by his wife and these witches. And just to touch on like Catherine Hunter, who was the witch or witches. I mean, it's got to be the creepiest portrayal in any movie I've seen the last few years. I mean, especially that scene where she's saying like, you want to meet like our boss, and it's got the water there and it's like the child in the water and everything, but like just her perched on that what was that, kind of like this wooden structure, and like this creepy voice and everything. It was just like, it was crazy. And I think that creepiness with the conflict and the black and white and the high contrast, I think they did a great job at just showing what Macbeth was internally going through the whole movie.
Yeah, that actually brings up another point that I didn't even realize till I thought about it. There was really no special effects. I mean, there's a few, obviously, like her turning into a crow, but like with the witch, it was just her acting the witch part. It wasn't like adding a bunch of crazy CGI or even practical effects. It was just the performance. So I thought that was really great, and that was pretty much true for the entire movie. I mean, there were some parts like seeing Fleance's face in the water, but just to kind of, that was just to kind of drive a point. But yeah, pretty bare bones for a movie, but I thought it worked really well. Another interesting choice that Coen did, I don't know if it was Coen with reimagining the play. I mean, abridging it is one thing, but he added Ross as the third murderer who lets Fleance flee. And in the play, it's up for debate. Nobody knows who the third murderer is, but Joel Coen makes a very deliberate choice there to put Ross as the third murderer. For what reason, I don't know. Maybe Ross has his own ambitions, which is kind of reinforced near the end where he picks up Fleance on his horse, which, that's not in the play either. So that was completely made up by, I'm assuming, Joel Coen. And then another small detail was that in the play, Macduff is the one that brings Macbeth's head to Malcolm. But in this adaptation, it's Ross who brings it. So it seems like Ross in this film has his own ambitions about overthrowing Macbeth for whatever reason. So that's kind of cool. Interesting.
Yeah, they're like slight but pretty big updates. It still keeps the overall structure, I think, of the story in the film. There are little things about, I think, other characters that expand on their overall maturation, but it doesn't really impact the overall theme of Macbeth, right?
Right. Yeah. The play itself, I mean, it's all what you know and love. Just some small things in the interpretation, very dark interpretation. And obviously, because it's film, you can make it much more violent. But yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I think moving on to favorite scene, I thought this was tough. I think, I thought about this for a while. I think that one that probably struck out the most, in my head when I think about it, is basically what I think of as the apex of the movie, or at least of the first half, is when, that the murder that's all built up towards, right? The zoomed in dagger in the throat, like ridiculously dramatic, super intense. But then on the other hand, anytime Catherine Hunter or the witches show up is just so captivating. And I think she stole the show. I think out of everyone in the movie, every time the witches showed up, it was like kind of froze in your seat while you're watching it. Like, whoa, this is extremely creepy. And to your point, zero special effects. It's like, thespian, like to the max, like this is how you act, right? In a play setting. And she's kind of translated that on the big screen. So I'm torn between the two, but I would say, Macbeth killing Duncan is probably it.
Yeah. And that was the violence I was talking about. That was because it's a film, you can show that level of detail. Very brutal. So my favorite scene, I also had a tough time. I mean, everything you mentioned was great, a lot of great acting performances, but I watched it twice, and the scene that I always remembered and just stuck out to me so much was when Ross tells Macduff that his family was slain. It's just first of all, the set is beautiful. It's in the forest there with the white sunlight coming through. So that by itself is very striking. And then Ross's hesitance, or the actor's hesitance, or Ross's hesitance and the actor's portrayal of it, very, gut wrenching, because he has something huge that he's about to tell Macduff, and I think the actor plays that very well. And then Macduff, actually, I didn't think played as well as I would have liked. It's Corey Hawkins, the actor, but it was still pretty good. And then Harry Melling, who was great as Malcolm, his kind of awkward position of trying to console someone by also like convincing him to take revenge. I just thought it was just a great performance, and the scene itself is gut wrenching, so it just stuck out to me a lot.
Yeah, it's a good one. Any scene in the forest too, like you said, it had this kind of other world kind of appearance, right, with the lighting and the contrast in the forest and all the sunlight, but it was kind of dark with the trees. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. So for our favorite quotes, I was conflicted because there are so many favorite quotes of Macbeth that people have dissected. So I kind of want to go over that really quickly. I actually want to choose a favorite acting performance, but my favorite quote It's one that Denzel says, I think, pretty well, very quickly in passing. He says, if it were to done when 'tis done twere well, it were done quickly. When he's mulling by himself, completely solo monologue about if he should kill Duncan. And he's going back and forth like, well, he's been a good friend to me. He's here in trust. It's kind of bullshit to just kill this guy just because a witch told me to. And so he's trying to convince himself not to. And then, you can tell he actually wants to. So then he's like, well, if I'm just going to do it, I got to do it. And I think that translates well into the life, really. I mean, obviously, hopefully we're not going to kill a king, but if you got to do something tough and you're trying to convince yourself not to do it, then, but you have to, then you say, well, just do it quickly, and then move on.
Yeah. And I think my favorite quote is like a similar area of the film. And it's, when his wife is calling him a coward for sort of backing out of killing Duncan, he delivers I dare do all that may become a man who dares do more is none. Which I understood as him saying that, it would be more cowardly to act than to back out. And it's one of those kind of duplicitous moments, that Shakespeare is so kind of famous for, that really makes you think. And the way Denzel delivered it, I thought was great. It was just, he's kind of being, to your point, the whole movie really is about this idea of being a man, and it's questioned over and over again. It's kind of a lot of lines going back and forth, that internal struggle that Denzel kind of went through the whole movie. And I think there he did a great job.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So I think if that's it for the quotes, then I think we're ready to give it an overall score.
Yeah, I just want to touch on real quick my favorite actor personally, because it was such an acting powerhouse. You might be surprised in my choice, but I actually liked Harry Melling as Malcolm. I thought he perfectly encapsulated the combination of theater and film, because he had a presence on film, but his delivery of the lines was very thespian, very Shakespearean. I thought it was really cool. His performance.
Yeah, and I'm going for Catherine Hunter as the witch. And I feel like Macbeth's wife, you could probably just call, like when you say the witches, you can just loop her in there, because really the whole movie she's doing the same thing, just kind of egging him on and kind of driving him a little nuts. But yeah, I think Catherine Hunter was awesome.
Frances McDormand, shout out to her. Great performance.
She did, not taking anything away from her. She did great too. I mean, when he storms out of the banquet hall, and she's kind of trying to calm everybody down and like tell him to kind of, in a nice way, get your ass back in there and act normal.
Be a man.
Be a man, right? And he's absolutely just losing it, and seeing crows and everything. Like, she did a great job there, and that was a great scene too, right? That was a totally
the sleepwalking scene. That
yes, yeah,
also good.
Yep.
The final battle too, like the choreography, that's one thing in film that wouldn't be as good in theater, I think. So the battle there at the end was really great.
Yep. All right, so let's score this thing. So, is it a good movie? I was torn on this. I mean, I put it as a 4.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. It was okay.
So interesting, because part of our is it a good movie we combine with watchability. I gave it as a 6, because like you can't just like pop it on and chill. But I will say, if you're into Shakespeare and you love Macbeth, I think it jumps up to a 9. Like if you know what's going to happen, you're familiar with the text. I think it's a very fun way to interpret the play. But yeah, if you're just like a regular guy or dude or whoever watching it, pretty tough to just throw it on.
Oh, that's the thing. Like the first 20 minutes, it felt like a foreign film to me. And I'm someone who had to study Shakespeare as an English major. I still was like, should I turn the subtitles on here? Because they were riffing those lines off so fast at some points that it was hard to follow.
Oh yeah, very hard to follow. I mean, actually, I had to read the play to understand what's going on and listen to some podcasts about the play. And then I was like, oh, now it all makes sense.
Yeah.
So Yeah. So I think if you have that level of Shakespeare knowledge, you'd really love it.
So we're gonna go with the regular guy score then, because that's gotta be like 90% of
Yeah.
people out there.
So that'd be a 5, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so we're gonna go around there for that. So that's fair, right? So
I think it's very fair.
yeah, because think about how many people out there who are actually read and familiar. I think it's pretty low.
Yeah. I wonder how Joe Coen feels about being beat up by Willy's Wonderland.
Yeah, well, I was going to get there. Yeah, because we're not fully done yet, right? There's still artistic, and for me, I put that as an 8. I mean, it was totally artistic. It was cool. It was like watching art in a lot of ways, right? Like legit paintings, or it's what it looked like. Some of these scenes. I mean,
Yeah, I give it a very artistic.
Yeah, and our score is a blend of these three, so we'll see here. So what did you give it for artistic?
A 9.
Okay, so 8 and a 9 there. That's high. Now, the kicker here, the decider, the date night score. I gave it a 5. I think that there's a language barrier being this old English, and a lot of people kind of zoning out. And I have to admit, the first time I watched this halfway through, I was dozing off. I had to kind of readjust myself on the couch and kind of wake up a little bit. So yeah, I think that can be a good or a bad thing, but regardless, I gave it a 5 here.
I did too. But I think if your date really likes Shakespeare, like again, it jumps up even maybe to a 10, because yeah, if she likes Shakespeare and it, don't just throw it.
You got to pick a score though.
5.
Okay. So I think where we're at here, I think we're about slightly shy of Willy's Wonderland. I think we're around like a 6.5. So I think Willy's beat Shakespeare. So I don't know how if Shakespeare's rolling in his grave or not, but
no, he's cool.
Yeah, he's good with it. Nick Cage deserves it.
Yeah, that's true. Shakespeare's never seen Nick Cage, so.
Yep. So any final thoughts, Joe?
We could have honestly talked about this movie for much longer. There's a lot to unpack, especially if you get into Shakespeare and the whole tragedy of Macbeth itself. But I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree. I think, this is coming out like to a mass audience through streaming services. And, you have to look at it as how the majority of people are kind of going to interpret it. And I think that's what our score was based on, and for me too, I'm kind of everyman here as well, and I think it's good. There's a lot to unpack, but most people are going to want to put it on once. Mm-hmm. And then after that, say, what did I think about it? They're not going to watch it or take a third or fourth time probably, and I think for one sitting, it's good. I think it's trying to do a lot though for one sitting.
Yeah. I mean, if we weren't trying to make a podcast about this movie, I would have forgotten about it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Wraps it up.
Movie Mavericks out.